Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women. Today we have Ginger Storey-Welch in the studio with us, and she's going to be talking to us about being a hospice volunteer. Ginger, thank you for coming into the studio. You've been in here before in your role as a leader in North Country 350 Alliance, but this is another one of your volunteer jobs, and so it'll be interesting to talk about what hospice is like from the volunteer point of view. We've done other programs with hospice before. We focused in particular on work on suicide awareness and prevention and being mortal about how to have those end-of-life conversations. So tell us a little bit about how you came to be a hospice volunteer.
Well, I suppose the main reason is because my stepmother was in hospice care, as was my father at a later point. And this was in Las Vegas, and hospice was absolutely wonderful to them. And I had a very strong feeling that I needed to give back by giving forward. So when I retired from teaching after 37 years, this was a logical extension, and I really love being a volunteer for hospice.
And hospice has been, Hospice and Palliative Care of the St. Lawrence Valley have been around for quite a long time now, haven't they? And it started out very small, as these things do, trying to meet the need. And of course, in a place like St. Lawrence County, where geography is very large and population density is very low, it's hard to serve a big county, isn't it? So
there's teams.
Yes, of course, and it really has to be stage managed just because of trying to make sure you're getting to where people are. So you've been doing hospice work for about 3 years. Would you describe for our viewers what hospice is? Because many people may not really have a very clear understanding of what hospice is and how it operates.
Okay. So let's do this with a little role playing. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are a patient and you've been going through a lot of treatments. You've been in and out of the hospital, through procedures, ups and downs, and it's challenging for you. And I'm your doctor and I'm sitting down with you. And I'm going to ask you, Donna, would you rather be treated at home or in the hospital?
Oh, very much I'd like to go home and be treated there. That's where I'm most comfortable, and that's where it's easiest for my family to help take care of me.
Sure, okay. Well, we have a program, and in this program I can actually continue working with you, but you will have a nurse assigned to you, and this nurse will sit down with you and your family and come up with a care program that is designed to help you to have the highest quality of life that you can have right now. It will help you with your pain management. It will help you with these symptoms that we've been talking about. And if you need equipment, they can provide equipment. And by the way, in terms of, because I know finances have been challenging, things shift when we go into this program, because Medicare, Medicaid, and your insurance covers it, and you will actually find that it will be less financially burdensome for your family and you than what we've been going through now. And in addition to this nurse, you can have a social worker come in to help. There are caregiver support. I know your sister's been helping you a lot, and you've been talking about how stressful that is. We have support for her. There is spiritual guidance if you wish to speak with a chaplain. Home health aides would come in if you need help with simple housekeeping or any kind of thing like that, bathing, just as need arises, that can be there. And we also have a network of volunteers that can help with things like driving, if you need help with that, or whatever, Physical therapy, you were mentioning how your back is bothering you from lying in bed so much. We have a physical therapist that can come in. Does this sound like a program that you would be interested in?
Boy, does it. Yes. It certainly sounds like it would meet a lot of the needs that we're struggling to meet right now.
Well, this program is hospice.
So.
And for a lot of people, and I'm going to come out of that role playing right now, for a lot of people they see hospice as game over. It's time to give up. It's, whatever. You're dying. And for us at hospice, that term dying, we see as the last act of living. And it's our goal to support people as much as possible in that last act of living. And it's much more beneficial when it's utilized earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And people tend to come into hospice at the last minute because they see it as game over. We see it as game on. We see it as, let's get in there, let's support this person, let's get whatever is needed in there. But because of that perception that hospice is about game over, giving up, the end, and it's really so much more than what people see it as.
And I can remember in years past talking with families who have used hospice that in fact what often happens is that a person's health, they don't pick up their bed and walk and never have another problem, but it actually improves, the stress is less on the family, and their quality of life goes up immensely because they're not in that constant round of back and forth to the hospital, the emergency room, the doctor's office. They're now getting the care at home where they're comfortable and where they feel like they're back in control a little bit of their life, don't they?
People tend to live longer under hospice care than they do for a comparable person who's not in hospice care. One of my favorite stories from On Being Mortal that you mentioned earlier with Atul Gawande was a story about a teacher. She was a piano teacher, and I'm a teacher at heart, and I'm a piano student at heart. So this really spoke to me. But the author's daughter was taking piano lessons from this teacher, and she had cancer, and she was in the hospital, and there had been this period of silence, and then she called him, because he is a physician, and she explained her situation and said, "What do you think?" And they went through different things, and he finally said, are you considering hospice? And she said, "Well, I don't know what good that would do, because, it's not going to change anything." And he said, "Well, one thing, it would get you out of the hospital, and it would get you home." So based on that, she went under hospice care. And his daughter said, "Can I go see her?" And he said, "I don't think that's a good idea." And then all of a sudden they're getting a phone call. Would his daughter like to come for a piano lesson? Hospice had sat down with this woman and had said to her, "What's important to you?" And she said, "I really want to teach." And hospice came in there. The nurse figured out a calibration of pain meds and then these meds that would keep her mentally alert, and found the best calibration that would, at that particular time, would make her at her best so that she could teach for several more weeks. She taught her younger students. She had 2 recitals, one with her younger students, and after each student play, she took them off to the side and spoke to them and talked about how special they were and gave them a gift. And then the part, and I hope I can get through this without crying, but her students from all over the country came and played Dvorak and Beethoven and things like that. And then she did pass away.
That was her final concert.
That was her last act of living, and that was what hospice was able to give this woman. But when you wait until the last few hours of your life,
you're not going to have those moments.
We can give you morphine.
Yeah, you're not going to have those moments, and that's the sort of thing. That's not just good for the patient. That's good for everybody who knows and loves that person, and is able to say goodbye and thank you in a way that is truly meaningful and will create that last memory that is nothing but joyful, right? Nothing but joyful.
One of the things we have is, it's kind of like the Make-A-Wish Foundation. We sort of have a little mini version of that with hospice, of where we ask the patient, do you have a last wish? Is there something that you really want to do? And we've been able to grant some of these wishes, and they're wonderful. One man wanted to go fishing again, and he wasn't physically able to get to the lake and get in the boat and etc. But what they did was hospice got a little kiddie pool and put it up in the local community center, worked with the DEC, got some fish in there that put him in there, and the man sat there and he fished for a couple of hours, casting and getting him out and putting him back and casting. And then afterwards, his son did a barbecue, and they sat down as a family and ate that fish, In another situation, a woman loved to go gambling. And so hospice worked it out. where she could get to the casino one more time, and they gave her a hat and beads and the whole thing, and the family apparently just had a rip-roaring time. And the daughter said afterwards that as her mother was dying, she was talking about that, I'm so glad I got to do that.
It wasn't about all the regrets, it was about that last wonderful moment when they were all together and they could enjoy themselves. Those are wonderful stories, and who wouldn't wish that for themselves and someone they love if they could make that happen? And it sounds to me like hospice is very good at making things happen.
If we can, but we need you on early.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the sort of thing that you decide 12 hours before the end, is it? So one of the things that might stop people from thinking about volunteering with hospice is thinking that you might be put into a situation where you feel over your head and outside of your comfort zone. So, but hospice does a lot with training of volunteers. So let's talk a little bit about the kinds of training that volunteers get so that they are able to do this kind of work that is so satisfying and yet feel comfortable, and that this is something that they can do.
I was very well supported getting into this volunteer work. We went through very comprehensive training and everything. It wasn't too much, but it was certainly enough. And then there's an ongoing training as well. But people have this perception of if you're we actually have a joke about it that you tell someone that, oh, I'm a volunteer with hospice now that I'm retired, and somebody says, God bless you. I could never do that, but it's so wonderful that you can. And what that person's perception is that I, as a volunteer, am constantly at the bedside of someone as they breathe their last breath. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm actually comfortable doing that. If you're not, you can just say that to the volunteer coordinator, and you would not have to be there.
You'd be part of the last wish people, huh?
There's plenty of other things for you to do, but I've actually, even as somebody comfortable doing that, I've only done that once, and it was actually very powerful. But more likely you're doing really positive things, like I love to get people outside. I remember taking this one woman outside, and she had Alzheimer's, and she didn't understand what I was doing, but then as soon as we got outside, she went like this, and she looked up and said, oh, yes. And just that simple thing of being able to do that. There was a woman that I worked with for over a year, and I would take her out driving. Sometimes we would go shopping, sometimes we'd visit a friend. And one time she said to me, when I'm home alone, all I think about is my pain, but when I go out with you for these 2 hours, I don't think about my pain. And I thought, that is why I'm a hospice volunteer. One time I showed up at the house of a man he was an elderly man in his 90s, and as was his wife, and he's the patient. And when I arrived, the wife said, could we go for a drive? And I said, sure. So she drives still. What they needed me for was to get their walkers from the car back into their living quarters, and then to retrieve them at the end of the trip. And they needed me to pump gas, and they needed me to just be there just in case. And there was no just in case, but they needed me to be there. But you
were there, and so that's why they were comfortable doing what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we did was we drove down these back narrow roads. And finally we went through enough narrow roads, we got to a bumpy dirt road. And this woman in her 90s is driving down this dirt road like this. And we went back to where they had their honeymoon 72 years earlier. And I got to witness this older couple doing that, and I got to facilitate it. That's not hard.
No.
I don't get to, God doesn't have to bless me for doing that.
So He already has blessed you for doing that. Yeah,
the blessing
was doing it.
And it's really a wonderful thing to do. And, so those of us who do the work, every time somebody goes, well, God bless you, I couldn't do it. Really? You couldn't take an older couple back to where they had their honeymoon?
Sure.
People could. It's really a wonderful thing to do.
So that brings up a good point, though, that you are, and as you say, some of these people that you've worked with for months, maybe a year or better, as you've been a hospice volunteer. So at some point, that person is going to die, is going to be gone, and so you're going to go through that loss. Talk to us a little bit, Ginger, about how that, is that difficult as a volunteer to go through that loss? By then, you've made a friend. And it's always hard to lose a friend. So, and this is a very conscious and purposeful decision you've made to get involved in someone's life that you probably didn't have any relationship with before becoming a hospice volunteer.
That's not the hardest part, you know. Yes, I get attached. The woman that I spoke to that I would take out driving, she's the one that I had the longest, and that's unusually long. But when she died, she actually had been doing pretty well. She was still ambulatory. She could go out for rides. We hadn't been out for rides because it had been winter and it had been icy. But she was still ambulatory. The last time I saw her, she had gotten up and walked out to her living room and sat in her chair, so she was able to do that. But she was getting in more and more pain, and she went like that. And would I want her back?
No.
To go through a slower death or anything like that? No. I mean, actually, it was okay the way it happened. And I still think about her, and I miss her, but I have other people that I'm growing attached to as well, and it's not as hard as it seems, and the rewards far outweigh that loss.
And that's always the case, isn't it, when you're really involved in someone's life, and you can't just say, well, I'm not going to get attached to them because they might die. Well, of course they're going to die. We're all going to die, and that's not how we determine how we want to live.
It's also not as intense as like when I lost my father.
Right, because you don't have the same long history of an emotional commitment to them. So, as a volunteer, how many people would you be involved with, in terms of how many patients or clients would you actually be involved with at any one time as a volunteer?
It varies. Sometimes you go through periods of where there's not anybody available, in your area, because you're kind of assigned to a certain area. I typically have at least one, sometimes two. There are I know one woman who only wants to have one. And so that's her criteria. If I have one, I don't want a second one. And hospice is just so grateful to have you that they're willing to work around that. But right now I have two. There's one man that I see, and then he has a neighbor that lives nearby that I'm doing laundry for. And doing laundry for someone doesn't sound like a big deal. The first time he lives alone, the first time I did his laundry, I brought it back kind of feeling like no big deal, here's your laundry, and he looked at me and he said, it is so nice to have clean clothes. Thank you. And I thought,
It's simple little things, isn't it? It's simple little things that you take for granted until all of a sudden, someone's maybe not able to do that for themselves anymore.
Exactly.
There's lots of different kinds of volunteer needs that hospice has. Some of it's as simple as stuffing envelopes and getting a mailing ready. Some of it is the more emotional part of it, like what you're talking about here. Talk to us a little bit about what other kinds of things that people can do as a hospice volunteer that may not actually involve working with patients directly.
Sometimes there's outreach. For example, if there's a health fair, you go and you set up a table and they give you all the information, they give you what you need to know in terms of what to say to people and things like that. And that's very important because it gets back to what I said initially, that the greatest benefit is when you come on earlier, so we're always trying to get that message out there and let people know what we do and what services we provide. And so that person provides a great deal of support. It might be at the farmer's market, and also there are just things at the filing and things like that.
In the office, right.
I know somebody whose one of her jobs is tracking the miles that volunteers drive, because that becomes part of the formula of the hospice gets reimbursement based on they have to have 5% of their hours volunteer hours, and driving time calculates into that. So volunteers are a very important part of hospice for that reason as well as other reasons.
How many people, on average, would be volunteering for hospice, like say during a month or something like that? Do you have any idea how many people would be involved in that on that basis?
I know that there are over 60 volunteers on the list. I don't know how many of them are actually active. When we have a meeting, sometimes we have 8 to 10 people. It also depends on how many, what the census is for
Right,
hospice in terms of the patients that we have
Can
and what
you-
their needs are.
Yeah, can you give us a sense, as a volunteer, you've been doing this for a while now, about what is the time commitment? In case someone's interested in doing this, one of the things you have to say is, well, do I have the time to do this? So what would be a good average that would be a time commitment to give?
Whatever you can give.
Okay.
Maybe it's an hour a month, maybe it's an hour a week, maybe it's 3 hours a week.
So there's no set formula?
Nope, nope, it's very much, and maybe you go to Florida during the months of November through April, you're not available during those months. So they're very flexible in working around you as a volunteer.
So another important part, I think, of volunteering is when you are the spouse or the child or the partner of the person who is terminally ill, it's a big emotional commitment, it's a big time commitment, it's just a lot of physical work. And so having hospice come in gives you some time off, doesn't it, as a caregiver? And taking care of our caregivers is something that is huge. It's just an incredibly important thing because it's easy to burn out. And not because you want to, but just because of the daily grind, shall we say. Yeah.
Exactly, yes, I've often gone in to be with a patient while the spouse goes someplace else, and sometimes it's just to go play bingo, and that's great.
Just a little time off. One of the things, and I know this from personal experience, you don't have to wait until someone is in a difficult spot. You can call hospice in to talk about what services are available. They will come to you and they will talk to you about that long before you need them. So we had a hospice volunteer come in and do that with our family not too long ago, just to get a sense of what was going to be available down the road if it became needed. So that's another great avenue for people to pursue before they think they need it. As you were talking about, don't wait too late. So
people should also be aware that part of hospice, there's kind of like 2 branches, and the branch we haven't talked about is the advanced illness management section of it, which used to be called palliative care. But for somebody who has some kind of a chronic long-term illness that isn't necessarily within that 6 months of expectation of life, that can help support people as well. And it also becomes a segue that at a certain point you might leave that program and move into the other programs as well.
Yes, we've been dealing with that as well within our own family, and it's been a tremendous resource because those kinds of long-term issues, it takes a long time to figure out everything that you need to figure out to manage your health in a safe and good way. So yeah, they've been very helpful with that. So Ginger, if somebody wants to learn more about how to become a hospice volunteer or just about hospice in general, talk to us about what that process is and what programs does hospice offer for educating folks about this and how to become a volunteer, because that's the next step, isn't it?
It's as simple as calling the hospice phone number, 265-3105. Area code 315. We've done that.
That's right. Now we're in the new world.
And of course they have their website,
That's right.
Hospice of St. Lawrence Valley, and that describes a great deal. And mostly I would just say again, call early. I've known of situations where I'm thinking of where one person really wanted to get outside one more time. And by the time he was on hospice care, he expressed that, and they brought over a hoist to help him get out of bed. They brought over a wheelchair to help him get outside, and by the time that was there, he was so close to the end that he never made it out.
Of it, yeah.
And I thought, just like 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah,
that
just
made a difference.
right,
and given him a higher quality of life for that.
And that's really what hospice is about. It's a higher quality of life for the person at the end of their life, but it's also for the people around them who love them and want them to have just one more, something, good experience, and to have that level of care that someone needs, but no one wants to go into the nursing home to get. They'd love to be able to do that at home, and that's really what hospice is, isn't it? It's being able to stay at home and get that kind of care that allows you to go as much under your own control of conditions as is possible to go. So.
And we're even taking care of people after the loss, when the person is lost.
The bereavement, through the bereavement process.
Because we
right.
have a very good bereavement program
Yeah.
as well.
And anybody who thinks that you can go through the loss of a loved one and not have to have a bereavement support is someone who hasn't been through it yet, because it really is such an important part of the grieving process and getting over what's happened to you, because you do need to come to terms with it, don't you?
We say you don't get over it, you learn to live with it.
Right, good. Well, Ginger, thank you for coming in today. Hospice does such wonderful work everywhere, all across the country, but here in the St. Lawrence Valley, this is a wonderful group of people. They're very dedicated. The medical staff is dedicated, the volunteers are dedicated, the support people are dedicated, and you too could be part of that wonderful group. And it is a wonderful group, isn't it, of people to work with.
It certainly is.
So,
part of the reason I did it.
That's right. And so if you're looking for a great and important volunteer opportunity, please think about hospice, because they can use you and you will gain so much more out of it than you ever give, don't you?
Yes, you do.
So thanks, Ginger. So this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming in. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which is filmed here in the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center of the Potsdam Public Library. These shows are a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County, and the Public Library here in Potsdam. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters. Ginger, thanks. That was just wonderful.